Had the pleasure in the past of having the Santa Fe Symphony and other venues here for our collectors, but tonight this is very special, and it was the energy and loveliness of this beautiful young lady that allowed us to open our gallery. We are not limited to that, though in the future, for those of you who live here, if it's an event that you feel would find an appropriation in our space, please feel free to contact me. I want your business card, particularly before you leave, and that's what you do with us. The owners of the gallery are Eric and Linda Holbrook and Chow, and we're it's a really exciting time for us as well. But mostly we have the honor of representing for 36 years this year the leading Native American talent. Many of them began their careers at the Institute of American Indian Art here on Cerrillos Road. Our gallery's been the result of that program for over 3 decades, which means for a lot of you before you were born. And today we continue that honor with our artists finding presence in both museum and corporate collections on a national and even more so international level. We invite you, there are little cue cards here. If you'd like to be on our mailing list to know what we're doing, we'd love to invite you and have you. If you have an artist you'd like to follow, that'll be available as well. But most importantly, thank you for being here for this lovely lady tonight, and I hope you enjoy the reading. Yes, pleasure.
Thank you.
Yes. Alrighty. Good.
Hi, thank you for being here, seeing some familiar faces and some new faces, and just really grateful to have this time to share with you all. Grateful to Windsor Betts as well. I had, we had not thought about Santa Fe as a place to stop on this book tour, but it intersected really nicely with the Art Santa Fe fair at the convention center, and I was looking around for venues, and this is such a beautiful space. Linda and Eric have been just super gracious and welcoming, and yeah, really grateful for it. So the reason we're here is this book, it just came out on the 9th, and chronicles 7 years of reporting and research into the life of my friend Carolyn Bush, who was murdered in 2016 by her roommate. I'm also really grateful to have Pamela Tinnen here. She's one of the subjects of the book. Carolyn was her best friend since Carolyn was about 6 years old, and has been, just an amazing resource while I did this research. She's going to actually open the reading with an essay she wrote about Carolyn and about her experience becoming the subject for this book, and then I'll get up and read from the first 10 pages of the book, and we'll sit down and have a little Q&A amongst us, between us, and then open it up for the audience. So please welcome Pamela.
Hi. A little nervous. So I am not a writer, or I'm a writer. I don't know how to say that yet. I am a curator, and it's actually really special to be here because my first job in the arts was for a collection that had quite a few of these artists in it, the Raymond James Financial Art Collection that's now the James Museum of Art in St. Petersburg, Florida, which is where Carolyn and I both grew up. And I had no idea. Sarah booked the space, and I looked at the artist list, and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. So it just feels like a really small world, and I'm grateful to be in such a gorgeous space surrounded by such incredible art. And I'm going to read from my first published essay that is about, well, I'll just read it. How about that? Okay. My best friend Carolyn was murdered in September 2016. A little less than a year later, I started to write in earnest. I'd always journaled, and on occasion, out of what felt like nowhere, a short story would come to me, like a flash of lightning, and I'd type it away and file it with all the other nostalgic bullshit that I hoard, and then never look at it again for a decade or more. When I was 17, I wanted to write the great American novel, but I never, as an adult, considered myself a writer. When Carolyn was 17 and I was 23, the summer that we were inseparable, she first showed me her writing. It is the only time that I remember ever being in genuine awe of someone witnessing the magnitude of their talent in real life. Carolyn loved books even more than I did. She read voraciously. She was forever engaged in the pursuit of knowledge and creative practice. I was nearly 7 years older than her, but she was light years ahead of me. She was just born cool. After she was murdered, I started having dreams about her. In the first one, I was waiting by an old rotary dial phone in some sun-drenched Florida room when finally a call came. Carolyn told me how she was sorry that she hadn't called sooner, that she'd been so busy. I asked what it was like wherever she was. She laughed and said it was very much like it is here, that she had a job and had moved into her new house, and then of course she had to spend all of her time decorating and settling in because she could never settle down until she settled in. One thing is different, she said. Fewer men. Which makes sense when you think about it, she laughed. Souls are made mostly of female energy anyway. In the spring of 2017, about 6 months after Carolyn died, Sarah Gerard messaged me on Facebook. She told me that there was something she wanted to ask me. She said it was best to talk in person. We had first met about 10 years prior when Sarah's father had dragged her on an art tour of the Raymond James Financial Art Collection. As administrator for the collection, I led the tour. In the years since, we'd both moved to New York from our hometown of St. Petersburg, Florida, and had crossed paths from time to time in the section of the Venn diagram where the art world overlaps with the literary. But we weren't friends. I told her to meet me at Shade Bar on Sullivan Street near my office at NYU. I had a feeling about what she wanted to ask me. I didn't yet know how I felt about it. It was late afternoon, around 4 or 5 o'clock. Sarah ordered a crepe and a glass of whiskey neat. I had a glass of Chardonnay. I wondered in passing if she ordered the whiskey to impress me. In Florida, in the punk scene, girls drink whiskey. I didn't indulge in it much at age 32, but I recognized it for what it was, a code marker. We were of the same tribe, or at least she wanted to present that way. Halfway through our first drink, she told me that she wanted to write something about Carolyn. She needed to understand what had happened to her. She wanted to know what I thought. I thought maybe she wasn't the right person to write about Carolyn. I hadn't yet read Sarah's other work and felt protective over Carolyn's legacy. I told her that if she was going to do it, I needed to know everything. I needed to be a part of all of it. She told me that she wanted to attend the trial. I told her that I would be attending also. That meeting was the first of many to come. I would eventually become the main source for Sarah's book. In my second dream about Carolyn, soon after, she was being interviewed by Terry Gross for Fresh Air. I was witnessing their conversation through the thick glass window of the recording studio. Their audio was piped into the room through surround sound speakers. I was listening more than I was watching. Terry asked Carolyn if she was okay after enduring such a horrific ordeal. She laughed and said she was fine. She said that at the time of the murder, of course, she was shocked. Shocked and pissed. She laughed again. That laugh of hers, confident and cool, and at the same time like a mischievous child. She shrugged and said, I don't know. I know now that it wasn't personal. It was never about me, really. Death is hardly ever to do with the person who dies. It has everything to do with those left living. In the summer of 2017, Sarah and I went to the Queens County Courthouse to review court documents. The trial was another couple of years off, but we didn't know that yet, and there wasn't much to review at that point. On the subway back to my apartment, she said something about me being a good writer. I rolled my eyes and brushed her off. She pressed on in the unrelenting way that she does, which I have come to greatly admire. Have you done any creative writing before, she asked. So I told her about my stories. I told her about the story behind my stories. And she told me, that sounds like a novel. You should write that novel. When I got home, I sat down and I started to write, and I haven't stopped since. That was 7 years ago. A lot has changed in my life since that night. I married and moved to the Catskills. Carolyn's murderer has been tried and convicted. Yet the most profound shift in my life has arguably been the movement towards fully embracing my identity as a writer. Carolyn had always known that she was a writer, but I didn't figure out that I was a writer too until the year after she was killed. Sometimes I think she writes through me. Our minds do the most incredible things to make sense of unimaginable pain. As the release date for Sarah's book approaches, I find myself in the throes of a whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, I am flushed with excitement. Intellectually, I can understand how weird that is, to be excited about something so morbid. But the prospect of sharing Carolyn's vibrant presence with the world, if I'm being honest, is exciting to me. It's what I've missed desperately for all these years. In a third dream, I was grocery shopping when I ran into her in the dairy aisle. She was so excited to see me, and she pulled me into a back room, an employee lounge of sorts. And there she told me how the only thing that she regretted about leaving so soon was that she never got the chance to publish her novel. It was finished and everything, she said. Oh well. That laugh of hers again, as if all of this life stuff was so inconsequential, so silly. I told her to give me the book anyway, that I could publish it for her. She just needed to tell me where to look for the pages. Carolyn, my best friend. She was a force of nature, a tornado of charisma, style, wit, and kindness. She is not the sort of person whose magnitude one can convey in a cocktail party anecdote. I have missed talking about her, but it's hard telling stories and knowing that they can't possibly land because these people never saw the magic in her eyes. They never heard her laugh, never witnessed her uncanny comedic timing, nor how brilliantly she delivered a joke. They'd never know how she smelled of baby powder and magnolias and stale tobacco. How it was impossible to be in a bad mood whenever she was around. I have longed to revive her presence. I have wanted so badly to bring Carolyn back. Through Sarah's book, I hope for Carolyn's memory to be immortalized. I long for her impact on my life and so many others to never be forgotten. I hope Carrie Carolyn Coco is only the beginning of a much longer conversation. I hope that there are a million more books about Carolyn to come. But along with this excitement, there is apprehension. Not everyone will perceive Carolyn's story, or mine for that matter, in the same light. Some will question the validity of sharing such deeply personal experiences, while others may have differing perspectives about the way things are portrayed. That's the thing about free speech. Everyone's got a right to their opinion. Even if that opinion is that we are all unlikable and our grief is a little narcissistic and performative, according to a recent ARC review for Carrie Carolyn Coco. I have come to accept that this is simply the reality of putting oneself out there, especially when the subject matter is as raw and personal as grief. But it doesn't feel great to read. To be honest, it really pissed me off. I am only so healed. In wrestling with these demons, I have come to discover the two things in life that matter most to me: to ensure Carolyn's memory lives on, and to become the most authentically excellent version of myself. If someone reads Sarah's book, they'll get a glimpse into the person that I am, the good, the bad, and everything in between. And if they don't resonate with my story, then so be it. Writing is a means of making sense of a fucked up world, of saying, okay, so you made me bleed, but I'm going to make sure that the world knows what you did, and I'll be damned if they don't remember. Art is not a finite resource. Art is a way to heal. Art is how we tell the future that we once were here. Nothing lasts forever, but through story, we approach immortality. So write. In the end, that's all we can do. Write our truth unapologetically and without reservation. And my truth comes with a disclaimer. You don't have to read it. You don't have to like it. But you don't ever get to say it shouldn't exist. In the last dream where Carolyn visited me, we were standing in a meadow upstate. It was summertime, and I felt her presence, but I couldn't see her. I cried out, "Where are you, Carrie? Are you here?" I couldn't hear her reply, but I knew what she was saying. She was telling me to do the magic eye trick. Cross my eyes and relax my gaze. The plane of my vision blurred like film off a large body of water on a hot day. Suddenly she came into view. I ran to her and I threw my arms around her, felt her body, warm and soft and alive. "You're real," I said. "You're really here." She smiled. "I'm always here. All you have to do is know how to look for me."
Beautiful.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Every time I hear that, I feel emotional. I cried the first time I read it. Thank you, Pamela. Thank you all again for being here. I'm going to read the first roughly 10 pages of the book. First, I'll tell you a little bit about how I wrote it. So, I actually didn't know Carolyn until I moved to New York. We worked together at a bookstore in Soho called McNally Jackson. It was the flagship location. It's still there. I think it's in a new location now, and there are like 5 additional locations throughout the city. It's become this little independent bookselling corporation, sort of. And Carolyn started working there about 9 months before I left the store, and she was in the coffee shop. And she was really pissed because she loves books. She read more than anybody, probably more than anybody else in the store. She had read more than I had at that point in my life, and she was about 7 years younger than me and Pamela. So I was intimidated. She came to a book club of mine where we discussed Anne Carson's Decreation. She totally crushed it. We were all like in awe of her intelligence. She knew that book inside and out, and it's a pretty experimental text, so I kind of struggled with it. Didn't really know. I don't always know what Anne Carson's trying to do. I love her, but I don't. She's a little out there, you know. So, but Carolyn was like, she had mastered the book already. She'd probably read it like 2 or 3 times at that point. And I later found out she had actually studied with Anne Carson at Bard College, which she had just left Bard to move to New York City right before I met her. Then I found out that we were from the same hometown, which is St. Petersburg, Florida. It's this little coastal city with kind of there's a tradition of punk rock girls who are a little grungy who come from that town, and immediately she made sense to me when she told me she was also from St. Petersburg, and I was like, oh, that's why you talk like that, you know, that's why you dress like that. And we knew all these same people. One of the first person she asked me about was Pamela, and I was like, wait a minute, I can't believe you know Pamela. And then I found out she was dating somebody that I'd gone to high school with, and they had just broken up. And I was like, wait a minute, you know Mike Asif, who's in this book? I was like, we got stoned together in a cemetery when we were 15. Like, what? I can't believe you know this person. And there was a list of people that we knew mutually that we had this immediate familiarity and admiration for each other. Then we co-founded an organization called Wendy's Subway that a little bit after they opened, it no longer really fit into my life. It was just hard to commute there in the city, but they still exist, and I encourage you to check them out because they have they give an award, a literary award in Carolyn's name now every year, and for an emerging writer to publish a chapbook that's in progress. They apply with an in progress project, and Wendy's Subway helps them finish the project and then publishes it as a chapbook. And then, and they also they house her library. Carolyn had a huge library, several hundred texts, which live now at Wendy's Subway in New York City. And if you check out carolynbushlivingarchive.org, which Pamela started and launched a week ago, in which royalties from this book go to support, you can go through the whole list of every book in Carolyn's library, so I encourage you to do that as well. So that's how I know Carolyn. She died only 3 years after I met her, but I felt like I had known her forever just because of our shared origin story. And when she died, so many people in my circle of friends and colleagues grieved for her they were absolutely shattered. And now I'm working as a private investigator. Back then, I did not, but immediately I sort of saw my investigative plan and how I would go about researching this book. And within about 6 months, I knew that I had to write it. And just because I knew who I would interview, all the places I'd have to visit, I was already familiar with so many places where she had lived and worked and played and gone to school. So I felt like I had to. I felt like I had to do it. It would be a real disservice to her memory if I didn't. And I wanted to make the book about her. So this is, her murderer is in this book, but he is not the subject of the book. Carolyn is the subject of the book. She's the main character. The book starts with her birth, and or her entire life story, I should say, is in this book from birth to death. And the book opens about a week before she dies. So you get to know her and her closest friends and family. So I'll just start with the first page. The first chapter is called Stanhope. That's the street where she lived. Stanhope, a light, open, horse-drawn carriage for one person, an optical device that enables the viewing of a microphotograph without a microscope. In September 2016, my friend Carolyn Bush's older sister, Jennifer Scatz, came to visit her in New York City. At 25, Carrie was nearly 7 years younger than Jenny, but with the same alabaster skin and deep brown hair, she could have been mistaken for her sister's twin. The two had always been best friends, inseparable from the day Carolyn was born. Jenny's employer rewards those who have been with the company for 5 years with a 5-week paid sabbatical and a $1,000 grant, which she had used to book a 4-day journey by train from Portland, Oregon to see her sister. It followed the 1-year anniversary of her wedding at which Carolyn had been maid of honor. Jenny and her husband Mike had celebrated their anniversary with a road trip to San Francisco and through the redwood forests. Then I came home, got on a train, and took the train alone in a sleeper cabin out to New York City to be with Carrie, Jenny says. She stayed a week in Carolyn's second-floor apartment at 1861 Stanhope Street in Ridgewood, Queens. That year, Carolyn had told their mother that she probably wouldn't have children and possibly wouldn't even marry. Jenny says now that she told her sister she supported her. Maybe she wasn't going to have a wedding or even finish college, but I was going to be there to celebrate her choices the way she had come out and celebrated mine, my boring, boring choices. During Jenny's stay, she and Carolyn went to the Wendy's Subway Next Wave art reading room installed at the Brooklyn Academy of Music in Fort Greene. As a founding board member of the nonprofit reading room and library, Carolyn was responsible for running a poetry reading for Wendy's Subway that night. Dia Felix, Ricardo Maldonado, and Dorothea Lasky were the readers. Afterward, the sisters went out for drinks at a restaurant called Number 7 nearby. Carolyn's friend Gabriel Cruz, also a poet and a founding board member of Wendy's, and his new partner, Emily Riley, accompanied them. Gabe has a warm and patient demeanor, and he and Carolyn had grown to be good friends in the years since Wendy's Subway's founding. They exchanged poetry and enjoyed debating philosophy and turning over metaphysical and religious topics together. Sometimes they playfully butted heads. Scorpio season was upon us, says Gabe, who calls Carolyn Coco. Emily, Coco, and I, all being Scorpios, struck up a conversation with our waiter, who was also a Scorpio. The waiter told them about the 3 phases of their sign: Scorpion, Eagle, and Phoenix. Everyone was in high spirits, and Coco seemed very happy to have her sister in town, says Gabe. It was funny seeing them together. He had always thought of Carolyn's mannerisms as so distinct. Now he could see they were family traits. Oh, wow, the way you shake my hand, he thought upon meeting Jenny. This bright and steely apprehension of things, still somehow so warm. The Bush sisters had a unique intensity. Her gestures had a profound effect on my ability to process certain emotions that I might have had a difficult time venting in the past, Gabe says of Carolyn. She and Jenny embodied the world similarly. They seemed very close. Aside from the reading, most of that week was spent at 1861 Stanhope, where the sisters cooked together, listened to music, and generally holed up. I don't care for New York, says Jenny. She had visited enough in her 20s when her best friend, Pamela Tinnen, was still earning her master's in curatorial studies at NYU, where she now works as a curator. Pamela had known the sisters since she and Jenny were in 6th grade, and she describes her relationship with them as familial. Jenny agrees. As much as Pamela was best friends with Carolyn too, she was perhaps even more like another big sister. People had actually assumed she was Carolyn's sister, especially after Jenny left for college. Carolyn had basically replaced Jenny as Pamela's roommate in St. Petersburg, Florida. Now Pamela had moved around the corner from Carolyn in Ridgewood, and they had keys to each other's apartments. That whole trip was about trying to get to know Carrie's life in New York and understanding Wendy's Subway, says Pamela. Jenny wanted to understand why Carolyn loved New York so much, but she told Carolyn that she didn't want to go into Manhattan. Carrie never really went into Manhattan anyway except for school, says Jenny. But upon arriving, Jenny had discovered that Carolyn was not enrolled at classes at the new school that semester. It was a point of contention. She had enrolled there part-time in a program for self-directed study to finish the bachelor's degree she began at Bard College in 2009. After finishing, she intended to pursue a PhD in literature or medieval studies or poetry or something in between. She had decided to delay for another semester and was working her ass off independently, but wasn't actively in school, Jenny says. They'd had a little argument about it. She told me she was going to be in school, and I wanted to be very respectful of that, and when I arrived, I realized she wasn't. Jenny was afraid that Carolyn had delayed enrolling in classes because of her visit, but she did not want to get in the way of her sister's academic pursuits. She got kicked out of Bard College, Jenny says, 4 years earlier. She flunked out. Instead of doing touristy things, they went to the farmer's market, and Jenny put together a big cheese plate with tomatoes. Tomatoes were their thing. Then she made soup and helped Carolyn clean out her closet, meaning Jenny sat atop Carolyn's fluffy white comforter on her wide, comfy bed while her sister took out every piece of clothing she owned and modeled it for Jenny for 3 or 4 hours while Jenny drank wine and said, not that, get rid of that. Ooh, I love that. They had always helped each other make these decisions, and historically their style had been similar, feminine, vintage pieces, in Carolyn's case, with a bit of edge. That day, they took 3 trash bags of clothes to sell at Beacon's Closet, then came back and spent the night talking. Carolyn's name was the only one on Unit 2A's lease. She had moved into 1861 Stanhope Street in February 2014 after several years of short-term living arrangements. That same year, the New York Times profiled Ridgewood as the latest up-and-coming neighborhood. Artists who were priced out of the increasingly trendy Williamsburg and Bushwick neighborhoods had crept east with the L subway line in recent years. Now, Ridgewood was filled with broke millennials, underemployed artists, craven property speculators, fearful natives, and first-time homeowners, the Times described. Cafes with vegan muffins, yoga studios, and destination pizzerias have naturally sprouted. Bars with names like Milo's Yard and Beer Laken are slated to open. Guitar cases, tote bags, and shearling coats are increasingly frequent accessories on pedestrians. Carolyn's apartment was an 8-minute walk from the L train on a mostly treeless residential block near a small park and a cemetery. Built in 1905, it was a pale 2-story brick row house converted into upper and lower apartments with roof access, a wraparound gate in front, stone archways over the windows, and a molded plastic overhang decorated in faux garlands. Next door was a moving company, and on the other side was a neighborhood pharmacy. The small vestibule of the building's front entrance opened onto a stairwell leading up into her unit. Apartment 2A occupied the entire second story and had wood floors, decorative ceiling tiles, and painted white, crown molding, and some greenery beyond the many windows, a rarity in this neighborhood. I'm going to pause for 1 second and just let you know, to sort of preface the next section, Carolyn was murdered by her roommate. His name is Render, and this next section is going to be a little bit about him, and that's why we're talking so much about their apartment and about her roommate. Carolyn's roommate, Render Stetson Shanahan, had moved in a year after her, relocating to the city from Rhinebeck, New York, his hometown 98 miles north, where he'd lived with his parents, with a 6-month stop in between at the apartment of family friends on the Upper East Side. His bedroom was bigger than hers, and the stairs outside his door led down into the building's vestibule. They shared a bathroom. The living room was furnished with a leather couch, an entire wall of bookshelves, and a coffee table. To the right of the living room, through another archway, was a spacious kitchen. Carolyn loved to cook. She kept labeled jars of spice mixtures in her cabinets, including some that she used for spell casting. Adjacent to Render's bedroom was a walk-in closet, which at first had been his to use, but which Carolyn had recently negotiated taking back. Though tiny, it had become a sort of mini guest room, which she used as an office and sometimes slept in when she would Airbnb her bedroom to pay the rent. She kept some of her clothes on a rolling rack in her bedroom and would roll it into the walk-in closet on those occasions as well. Pamela had slept in the small room when she Airbnb'd her own apartment, and Jenny slept there when she was in town too. Carolyn's bedroom was smaller than Render's, but she had easier use of the common areas. Her door was to the left of the living room and opened onto it. Render rarely used the living room. Like the hallway closet, Carolyn's bedroom shared a wall with Render's room. So when Airbnb guests stayed in it, he was surrounded. They were on one side of his room, and Carolyn was on the other. Like Carolyn, Render was an alum of Bard College. He was a year ahead of her. He's older than Carolyn by exactly 9 months, February 19th, on the cusp of Aquarius and Pisces, to her November 19th, Scorpio. They linked through another Bard alum after Carolyn's first roommate in 2A moved to California. Carolyn described Render to Pamela as the ideal roommate because he paid his rent reliably and rarely left his room when he was there, which wasn't often. Despite spending a good deal of time at Carolyn's, Pamela seldom saw Render. She had interacted with him directly only once when she couldn't get the front door open, and Carolyn texted him to let her in. He ran down, opened the door, then ran back into his room without even saying hello. She remembers thinking it was kind of weird. They may have said hi in passing otherwise, but he never stopped to chat or ask how she was. He was the kind of person who would wait until you were animatedly having a conversation in the living room so that he could sneak into the bathroom and not have to say hello, she says. Jenny spent most of her week in New York with Carolyn, but there was one night near the end of her stay when she texted Pamela to say she was craving spaghetti. Carolyn was out doing something, and Jenny had the night to herself. Pamela invited her over. She just came in and commandeered the kitchen, says Pamela, and she started asking for spices that she didn't have. Pamela isn't a slouch cook, but both Carolyn and Jenny had learned to cook from their dad, and Jim Bush was a star in the kitchen. He had cooked for the family throughout their childhoods, and that night, Jenny wanted comfort food. So, what's the deal with the roommate? Jenny asked Pamela over the spaghetti. I haven't laid eyes on him. She had met him briefly in the hallway when she had first arrived, but hadn't seen him since. He just stayed in his room. She had asked Carolyn at one point, doesn't he hate the fact that we're being loud and staying up all night and talking in the kitchen and smoking cigarettes and blah, blah, blah in the house? But Carolyn had brushed it off. No, it's fine. He's fine. I remember Jenny saying that she was worried about Carrie, the direction of her life, says Pamela. What's going on with Carrie? Is she going to be okay? Jenny had asked her. Carolyn was not always totally forthcoming. She could keep certain things private or compartmentalized. She wasn't secretive, just selective about what she shared. I didn't even know that Carrie was kicked out of Bard, Pamela says. Jenny told her that night while they were eating spaghetti. It's not something she talked about. She wonders if Carolyn was embarrassed about it. She had high expectations for herself. Do you remember being 25, says Pamela? Outwardly, you presented as excited and adventurous, up for any challenge, but inwardly, you were terrified of failing. She just wanted to be in the city, she says. At times, it was a struggle. New York can be ruthless. Pamela's own parents didn't want her to go there. They would have been very happy if I moved back to Florida and worked at Walmart, she says, as long as she was nearby. But all that did was make her want to prove them wrong. There's a sense, at least to those living in New York, in which the resilience of the city's inhabitants is born of the necessity to rationalize away their collective suffering with delusions of superiority via that same suffering, as though their ability to survive and thrive at times, as Carolyn had put it, in extreme circumstances, makes them better, stronger, and more determined than others. While Jenny has always disliked New York, she really, really leans into the Pacific Northwest, says Pamela. When she visits Jenny in Portland, everything is quaint and picturesque, and we're going to the farmer's market, and everything is so beautiful. As a New Yorker, Pamela thinks, loser, don't you want to be in this disgusting place with these mutant pigeons? She imagines this was Carolyn's thinking, too. I was so excited about who she was going to be, says Pamela. She was figuring everything out. Jenny had a hard time finishing college as well, repeatedly dropping out in the middle of the semester and graduating from Portland State University at 28. Pamela thinks about that when she remembers her conversation with Jenny. Maybe Jenny hadn't wanted Carolyn to struggle like she had. Carrie mentally has her shit together, Pamela recalls telling Jenny. She knows who she is, and the rest will figure itself out. After dinner, they walked to Aunt Jenny's, a new neighborhood bar with a kitchen and a pool table. Carolyn met them there wearing a black dress that showed off her legs. Wherever she was coming from, she had wanted to look vampy. They sat outside under an umbrella while Jenny smoked. Pamela was stressed about work. Once Jenny finished her cigarette, they found a booth inside. They had the place to themselves. Carolyn went to the bar and came back with a beer and a shot of well whiskey. Her sister and Pamela teased her. Is she always going to be that cool, or is she going to outgrow it like we did? Then they all did the photo booth. Pamela still has the pictures. Finally, Pamela was tired and had to go. I didn't really want to, I just couldn't stay awake anymore, she says. Jenny and Carolyn walked her out, and they stood smoking under the street lamps. Over the years, when Pamela had hung out with the sisters together, there had been a palpable big sister, little sister dynamic between them, but she remembers feeling that night that they were all just friends. Like Carrie was a peer and just happened to be a little younger. It was a warm and happy feeling. I felt like we were all on the same level, vibing and enjoying ourselves. Pamela wouldn't be seeing Jenny again this trip. For their last night together the following day, Jenny and Carolyn were going to go out, just the two of them. I wanted to have a special meal to remind us of being in this moment, and so we decided that we would do the very New York thing and go to Russ and Daughters, Jenny says. Carolyn was excited about getting to eat organ meat after reading Nourishing Traditions, a tome from the 90s about eating it combined with lacto-fermented pickles or something, Jenny says, and how that was the healthy thing. Of course, now those things are all the rage. The sisters also wanted caviar and bellinis. Pamela said goodbye. She remembers Jenny saying, "Come to Portland," because that's what she always says. She certainly doesn't want to come back to New York, says Pamela. Then Carolyn said something like, "I'll see you at your thing next week." Then Pamela walked home. That was the last time I saw her, she says. Thanks. Thank you. So Pamela's going to come up, and we'll just talk a little bit about writing the book.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody has questions.
Yeah, and you guys can ask questions as well. We'll stand. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
So Pamela.
Hi, Sarah.
So what was it like being the subject of a book?
You know, I don't know. It's wild, the things that you say that you don't know that you say, and then when you read the transcript, you're like, what an asshole. But I will say this, like, one of the things that stands out to me is you started, I think you reported our first conversation.
Yeah.
So what I talk about in the article, and every conversation. And when I started actually like reading the transcripts, there were things I don't remember. Like, not just like I don't remember telling you, like I don't remember them happening. And that was really surreal because I have a pretty good memory, I think. And that's when it really clicked for me, like how valuable this is, because you know, we remember things that are core memories. We remember the things that we remember because we remember them and remember thinking about them. And remembering them, remembering, whatever. And then there's so many things that we forget. And, you know, if somebody's still in your life, then you're building new memories.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're gone, it
Yeah.
just starts to fade. And I might be like a memory hoarder, but that was upsetting, and I wanted to document it. And I saw how important it was that you were documenting those things, even the things that don't end up in the book.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that those transcripts survive, and other people's memories, and like.
Yeah. Other people have said that too. So I interviewed about 175 people for this book. I interviewed Pamela more than anyone else. I've interviewed you. I mean, and it became pretty casual the way that I would interview you. At a certain point, I was like, I just should stop recording every single conversation I have with Pamela, because we were talking like every day, you know, and it started to feel like weird. Like we were actually more friends, and I was like, why am I recording all of my conversations with my friend? But other people have said the same thing. Adjoa, one of the other central characters of the book, who was really close friends with Carolyn and a colleague of hers at Wendy's Subway, mentioned that too. I sent her the transcript of our first conversation, and yeah, there was a lot that she didn't remember. Even she had talked to Carolyn just the day before she died. Carolyn actually messaged her the night before she died and offered to send Adjoa a bunch of healing herbs that she had in her pantry that she wasn't using, because Adjoa is also an artist and a poet, and she calls herself an ethnobotanic literary critic. Her main mode of study is the intersection of plant life with colonialism, especially the African diaspora. So Carolyn had offered to send Adjoa these healing plants, thinking, oh, this is something Adjoa would love. That night, she was murdered. And so Adjoa actually reached out to her the next day, not knowing yet that she was dead, and said, okay, when should we meet up to do the herb handoff? And then maybe a half hour later found out Carolyn had been murdered the night before. And there was a lot that she didn't remember about that conversation, but she had dictated it to me about a year after it happened. So, and other things of that kind too. I mean, just all the people that I had interviewed, I think a lot of them appreciated that these things were being preserved, you know, things that they didn't even know needed to be preserved. Yeah. So, does anybody have questions about this? Because it's, yeah. I could continue interviewing Pamela here.
I'll just say whatever.
Well, what's one of the things that you appreciated not having, you know, having been preserved, not forgetting?
Well, Carrie was the kind of person that really compartmentalized her friendship group. So, you know, there were like her bard friends, and then like her old friends, and you know, I didn't know Adjoa. Mm-hmm. She just kept everybody like in their own circle, mm-hmm. you know, and it's been really interesting to see the larger picture, because it's, I mean, I would say like it affirms the person that she was. Like she was consistently Carolyn, but I get to learn about, she was the kind of person that like you just had like an interaction on the street with her and you'd remember it. Like she's just so dynamic. And so like being able to have, see, I really am a memory hoarder. Like being able to like experience other people's memories and like be like,
yeah,
like has been really meaningful.
I really wanted to continue getting to know Carolyn.
Yeah.
And this was sort of my way of doing that, because she stays alive through people's memories, and I'm learning things about her all the time, and I became a little bit of a hoarder myself of like facts about Carolyn, like the books that she was reading, the music she was listening to, new friends, places that she had worked that I didn't even know about. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And these experiences where that she had with various people. Actually, some of my interviews with people who were her friends mostly are like encounters they had on the streets, you know, actually, and they would like, oh, I remember the last time I saw her, I was on my way to H&R Block to do my taxes, and I ran into her in the East Village, or, you know, things like that, and they narrate these conversations for me, and then I get to sort of feel like I'm there having these conversations with Carolyn too, and I asked them for details so I could really make the visual. What was she wearing that day? What was the weather like? And a little bit of an investigator into this person. Yeah.
Well, and I would read what somebody else would talk about. Like, there's the one where she was with her friends, like going to so we grew up on the Gulf Coast of Florida. And there's like a thing, I don't know whose idea it was, but I mean, as you probably gathered, I was friends with her sister in high school, and we're the same age, and then Carrie was like the little sister, and then, you know, she and I ended up becoming super, super close when she was 17. But when Jenny and I were 17, we drove, you can drive from the west coast of Florida to the east coast. We would watch the sunset and then go and watch it rise on the other side of the coast. Nice. And so Jenny and I and another friend did that. And I mean, that's a really funny story in and of itself, because we got there and I only had enough money for either gas home or food, and we were starving. So we got there and we like fell asleep on the beach, woke up with the sun rising, went swimming in the ocean, and then we were like, we're starving. But I didn't have any money, and it was like it was before I had like an ATM card. Probably didn't have any money in the bank anyway. So we were like, we figured out to just go into one of the hotels and eat the continental breakfast. And that's the first time I learned about doing that. And I read through your transcripts, and that ended up in the book, that Carolyn did the same thing with her friends. And there's no way that, I mean, that was because Jenny had. And I will also say, even though she is 7 years younger, 6.5, I should say. I don't want to age myself. But she was intimidating, and it's been really cool to read that she like mattered as much. I mattered as much to her. I mean, I know that, but she was the kind of person that just seemed so cool.
Very worldly, world weary at a young age.
Like if she liked you, you would be like, and so like reading these stories about when she was younger, and she was like into the bands that I was in that were inherently like not as cool as the bands that she grew up to like, but that they, you know, to see the influence on that, like that Jenny and I had on her growing up, has been really cool.
And this was also part of the inspiration for the Carolyn Bush Living Archive too, because there's just so much that didn't make it into the book. The original manuscript for this book was 550 pages, and my editor was like, I'm not fucking reading that. And you need to cut like 250 pages, and I ended up cutting like 200, because that was the most that I could cut. And it's much, much better for having done that, but there was just so much that like tragically I couldn't include, because the book would have been 1,000 pages long. So Pamela had the idea to put them in this living archive that all of Carolyn's friends and loved ones could contribute to. So now the task becomes going over these manuscripts again, or these transcripts, and I have audio files for all of the interviews that I did with people, and we're kind of chopping them up and uploading these oral histories, as it were, to this website where people can continue listening to, you know, to these stories and getting to know her like we have. Yeah.
Well, and it's just really weird because it hasn't even been 10 years, and I literally only have 30 seconds of video of her. That's it. Like, because we didn't record everything.
Because you don't think your best
back
friend.
Well, but back then, I mean, I have like.
We didn't have. There's no iPhone back then. You didn't.
Well, no, there was iPhones, but we weren't. I don't know. I don't know. I just wasn't doing it like that. I don't know why that's changed now, but I have like more video of people I don't even know the name of that person, right? Than her. So.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Thank you all again for being here. Do you have a question?
I wanted to just share one thing. I heard a woman named Ofelia Esparza say she's like a folk artist who won the National Endowment for the Arts Award. She said, my mother said, when we humans all experience 3 deaths. The first death is the day we give our last breath, the day we die. And the second day is the day that we are buried, never to be seen on the face of the earth again. the third, but most dreaded death of all is to be forgotten.
So we're prolonging her life in this way. Thank you
Yeah.
for that. Whew. Does anybody want some chilled white wine? It's
Or
it's a
red
little
wine,
hot.
or whatever, or a book, or a whatever.
Thank you for being here and listening to this conversation about Carolyn and getting to know her as well. I encourage you to buy a book from Offset. They were gracious enough to be our official bookseller for this event. And please browse and look at the artwork in this space, which is absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
Breathtaking work.
Really, truly,
Yeah.
truly.
Really, like
unbelievable.
several steps above.
I mean, everything is a treasure in here, for
Yeah.
real.
Yeah.
And I just feel so, grateful
Yeah.
to be here.
Thank you again to Linda and Eric for having us.
Welcome.
It's been really special.
Thank you, ladies.
Okay, we're gonna hang out if you wanna.
Yeah, let's mingle.
We're gonna-